morning. For those of you who don't believe it, anything can happen. Duke lost. So anything can happen, and we'll see what happens. Thank you for joining. Sean, Dan, and I are here for the morning meeting with you to take you through the day and then to kick things around and then to take your questions. If you're here on the two-way platform, raise them high. Raise your yellow hand if you'd like to be in on the conversation. We'd love to have some new folks in as well, whether you love the tariffs or do not like the tariffs. We'd love to hear from you. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, thank you for joining. Please don't put smack in the chat, and please respect everybody. Spirited conversation, welcome. Smack in the chat, not so much. Peace, love, and understanding always. Thank you for joining. Sean, who's going to win tonight in the men's Final Four?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Someone will win. Dan, do you
I
have
think
a,
I'm just going to go with Houston because if you can come back like that, you should deserve
yeah,
it.
yeah, Dan.
Yeah, I'm going Houston as well, but I think it'll be a good game.
Do you guys have big 401ks? Do you have big money in your 401ks?
Listen, I still believe that you put the money into your mattress, you dig a hole in the backyard, you put it there, and you don't write it out.
Dan, what's the longest you've worked someplace with a 401k?
H&R Block for six years, and I'm married to someone who's
Has
invested.
a lot of invested. Sean, do you have a military investment account?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, not that anyone cares, but the military allowed, it used to be just when I got in, it was 20 or nothing. And then they started allowing us to have the access to the TSP program, which is the government one. It's not the same version, but whatever. But yes, I do. I had a TSP. I rolled that over. I had a 401k from the RNC. I rolled that over. And I still have a military TSP.
And are they managed by Fidelity or somebody like that?
Somebody like that. The government one, the military one is still like you get to choose, like ABC or aggressive, moderate. You can mix and mingle, and then everything else has been rolled into something that is managed. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Welcome in, everybody. I will say,
Are you looking for advice or
no? I just want to disclose.
You want to reveal your?
Oh, I was going to
disclose
my yeah.
I want to disclose all conflicts. That's all. I just curious how much you guys are experiencing this, like some others who are focused on their own personal accounts. I will say, and we've saw this all last week since the declines began. There's a fascinating story to discuss. It's also deadly serious to lots of people, whether you're a business owner or you're worried about your 401k. And so, as we discussed it today, I'll just say again, we're super concerned about all points of view from an intellectual point of view, but also very sensitive to the fact that many of you are feeling anxiety about this, and some of you are feeling anger. Even some people who voted for Donald Trump 3 times are feeling some anger at what is seen in many quarters, not just elite quarters, as a misguided policy that's causing lots of damage for no apparent reason. Many of you think it's great. So we're sensitive to all points of view. And again, sensitive to the personal dimension of this for so many. Thank you for joining again. If you want to be in the conversation, raise your hand. Big action today is at the White House. The president is meeting the Dodgers and be a photo op. Then photo op with Netanyahu at 1, another photo op with Netanyahu at 2, and then at 2:30 press conference. I'm sure everything will be pushed back, but you can expect at a minimum the president to take questions at the press conference. And while I'm sure there'll be some questions about trade, and Netanyahu is here in part to talk about U.S.-Israeli trade, there's going to be a lot of questions about what's going on. And surrogates out all day. Already some on cable. We'll show you that in just a moment, as well as the head of the Council of Economic Advisors is speaking at the Hudson Institute today. And so you're seeing many surrogates out. I don't know what the vice president's doing today. I do know that on Capitol Hill, while both the House and Senate are in, they're doing various things, various votes and private meetings with the caucus and conference and leadership meeting. A lot of focus on this question of what, if anything, to do about the tariffs. There's more upset amongst Republicans on Capitol Hill than has been publicly revealed so far. And you don't have to have the best sources possible on Capitol Hill to know that. It's not just Congressman Bacon of Nebraska, who's a regular open critic of the administration. Many people who are fully supportive of the president under most circumstances are wondering what, if anything, Congress can and should do about this. We'll talk about that in a moment. But there's nothing on their formal agenda today. that I know of relating to tariffs. They're hearing from the head of the U.S. hearing from the U.S. Trade Representative, both the House and the Senate later in the week. But you can bet that this is what reporters will be asking about, and this is a big topic of conversation, including how it relates to reconciliation. As you know, I think this makes it more likely they'll pass it. However, there's some indications that this is causing so much upset that it may cut the other way. We shall see. So, gentlemen,
I will tell you that this first vote that the House has to take this week is going to be telling.
Yeah,
Jamming them on the Senate budget, which is not the most conservative thing I've seen, is not going to be easy. I know the president's willing to make calls, but I actually think this is going to be the first big test.
I
I
agree.
get it. If I were a House member, I'd be pissed at having to swallow this thing. It sucks. It's not conservative. Um, and in some ways, I hope they do fight back.
Yeah, and they'll push that vote probably till Thursday would be my guess because they need some time to figure it out. Look, I think right now I agree with what you said, but I think right now they're missing about 20, maybe about 20 people who they can't count on, and they're just going to have to gather them all up and
Yeah,
we'll
but you
see.
know as
Well,
well as I
and
do,
I
you
think it's
start with
important.
20 and you go like, hey guys, the vote's tomorrow, and it goes down to 12, and then
Yeah,
hey, it's in 5 minutes. But I think there's a 4, 5 solid folks. And
I
granted, he
agree.
got two more, but the guys who are the Andy Harris's of the world don't just roll over. They don't give a shit.
Yeah,
And I think this is not going to be the standard, yeah, I think that 20 goes to 6 quick, but the 6, probably more like the 4, are not guys that are going to roll.
yeah, but
And
they just need to get half of them. Go ahead,
it's
Dan.
important to say the reason they are upset is because I keep saying this for all of you on here who talk about debt and deficit, the Senate bill is a joke. You
Yes.
are going to, yeah, it's going to add about 5 to 7 trillion in the debt and deficit.
Well, but more on my end,
Just leave it at that.
I would just say this: I'm less concerned about the current policy and more that there's not enough cutting of the spending. It's insane.
Because you're going to add to the debt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a
All,
joke.
all, all right. So over the weekend, you saw a bunch of administration surrogates out on cable and broadcast TV. I'm here to tell you that they put out no fires. I just tell you factually that no one who was upset about the policy and the market activity on Friday was listened to the administration representatives and said, "Oh, now I get it." They think this is a bad policy, poorly executed by people increasingly they view as having no credibility, and it's a real problem. And the president last night spoke on the plane. He wrote on Truth Social. He's on Truth Social again this morning. 104, please. Um, Saying basically everything's great. There'll be a little bit of medicine, but not so bad. Our oil prices down, interest rates down, no inflation. Uh, China, our past quote leaders are to blame for allowing this and so much else to happen to our country. Make America great again! Exclamation point. Again, we'll see if he can calm the markets today. He's speaking, unless they really delay the press conference today. Yeah, he'll speak while the markets in the U.S. are open. Lord help him if the split screen does not serve him well. Now, this morning, more administration officials out trying to continue to argue that this policy is working, mixed messages on whether the president's open to a deal or not, and pushing back on critics. So let's play back to back, please. First, the president's trade advisor, Mr. Navarro, speaking on CNBC.
Now, the thing I would say to retail investors is don't get panicked out by all of this. And what the president could have added to that fine truth was the fact that the biggest tax cut in American history, the broadest base tax cut in American history, is coming within a matter of months. So any discussion of recession seems silly when you factor that in. Plus, the Fed is not going to do its job, but the long bond is doing it. We're lowering our oil prices, which is just amazing. Right. And here's the one other thing I want to say macro-wise, Joe, because look, this is all about people worried about.
All right, cut out of this.
Recession.
Cut out of this because the robot thing's killing me. You get the point. All right, here's Kevin Hassett, National Economic Advisor, 106 on Fox this morning.
that this policy, he believes, will help American workers. And there's a reason why he believes that, because policies like this in his last term did help American workers. After really 2 decades of no real wage growth in the U.S., we got more than $6,000 per family after we had tariffs and tax cuts and deregulation. And so he's doubling down on something that he knows works. And he's going to continue to do that, but he is also going to listen to our trading partners. And if they come to us with really great deals that advantage American manufacturing and American farmers, I'm sure he'll listen. But in the end, it's President Trump that's going to decide when a deal is good enough. And I think it's interesting that so many countries are lining up. The final thing I'd like to say is that there's so many people that keep saying, oh, it's the American consumer that's going to bear this tariff, is going to make inflation go up and so on. But if you think about it, President Trump's view is it's these countries that are sending inelastic supply to the country, and so they're going to bear the brunt of the tariffs. And if that were false, then if they didn't bear the brunt, then they'd be quiet about it, right? The fact that they're all angry and upset and sending retaliation our way, it suggests that President Trump is right, that they bear the tariffs. If they're worried about bearing the tariff, that would explain their behavior. It's not the American consumer.
All right, ask you both the same question. Sean first. Sean, how bad is this for the president and the country politically and economically as of now?
Well, I think today is a big day for him. I mean, this could be, depending on the sell-off, this could be a very bad day economically. I will say, if they need to go out and reassure 2 things. One, I said this last Friday, they have not gotten the deals they need. Israel coming away tonight, if Netanyahu can get some kind of a deal, that's a good sign. Not just for Israel, but I think that they want to deal. So how this goes today matters. You saw Zimbabwe and some other, Vietnam, I think one of the other ones, but come to us. Where a lot of our, you think about textiles and things like that. There's a lot of Asian countries Southeast Asian countries where this could be a big thing. And if they can show progress, they haven't. I expected to see, as I said Friday, 5, 6, 7 countries where they were putting out Truth Social saying, we cut a deal, we cut a deal, we cut a deal. That's so. The other thing is, you mentioned the mixed messaging. They've got to get on the same page. Either they want countries to deal, or this is a deficit reduction exercise. But you've got to tell people what they're doing, not just internally, but externally. Countries need to know whether they should be coming and making offers. But right now, it's why would I make an offer if at the end of the day you stay at 17.5 or 10%? So I think this is a big turning point today to get a sense of what their goal is and how they're going to deal with other countries. But this is, I think the president has laid it all on the line. There's no question about it. Politically, he's put it all over the line and said, I'm willing to bet everything on this, because you really are. If he is right, and remember, this is a president who's been told, no, this isn't a good idea. You can't win. You can't do this since he entered politics. And he has proven the critics wrong every single time. So I get what he's doing. I appreciate the fact that he's trying to bring businesses back to America and stand up for our workers. And I hope to God that he's right. But I mean, and I give him a lot of political credit. You're risking everything for this.
Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's bad, and it potentially is on the precipice of being historically bad. And I think, to Sean's point, we don't know what they really want. I mean, if Vietnam removes its tariffs, and we do too, then Nike's not coming back to the United States. The only way that you can get reshoring is to put up walls for sustained periods of time, such that companies say, okay, it's not going to get any better in the next 5 years. We need to come back. But that then goes in the face of, we're going to try to sell more, beef in Australia. So I don't really think they know what exactly it is that they want. And I think that, I wouldn't say today is a big day, but I think by the end of the week, it's big, because I still think, even though Wall Street is selling off, full disclosure, I'm around a lot of people, both in my house and other places, who work on Wall Street. So I am a little, not jaded, but influenced by all the stuff that I constantly hear just in my own personal life. But I think the street still believes at the end of the day, there's going to be an exit ramp. But if he is really digging in, we are looking at weeks, months of this. It's going to hit corporate profits. It's going to start to lead to layoffs. It will lead to inflation. And you can get kind of a death spiral where the consumer tightens their belt, the business tightens their belt, and it just keeps going down. And we're going to get to what the breaking point is, but it's bad politically, it's bad economically, and nobody sees what the upside is in the short run.
Well, I think that's the key, Dan, the short run, right? And I appreciate the fact that, many people, especially if you're near retirement, this is a very scary period for you. But at the end of the day, when you look at whether it was COVID or a lot of the other major issues, like the market will rebound. It's just, it may not, I don't know if it's in a month, if in 6 months, but it will rebound. That's just historically the case. I think that to your broader point, they need to define success. Because you have a couple people going out there saying, our goal is to get better treatment. Fair, I'm all for that. But if it's for deficit reduction and onshoring, then we've got to be clear that this is going to be a longer bet. And I think people have to be able to plan for that.
Well, and the other problem is, and I keep saying this, yes, 35% of the country has been devastated by trade. But 65 to 70% of this country has benefited historically from trade. But it just does. Companies and individuals have benefited in so many different ways from trade. You can't unwind in 80 years in 8 days. So the question is not just like, okay, the market will come back. The question is like, are we truly digging in to rewire the entire global economy? Because that is not a 6-month thing.
So the one thing I would say, and I'll make it quick, but like when you say we've benefited from trade, we've benefited from getting cheaper goods, right? But at the end of the day, we've done that at the sacrifice of giving up our entire manufacturing base. And that's that. So short term, yeah, you got cheaper crap from China.
It's not just that, though.
It's not just that. Term, we have no industrial base. This is not a recipe.
That is not true at all.
Disaster.
It's a more high-tech industrial base. It is not making, some of it, you're right. It is not making sweatshirts in North Carolina as much anymore. It is not as much. Yeah.
Or machinery or munitions, or PPE or pharma. We have outsourced.
Well, that's not true. We do make some munitions here. The CHIPS Act was just passed to try to get some of that high-tech manufacturing back. But see, Sean, that's the problem. It is when Republicans paint this as black and white, we've been crushed and trade's been terrible. That is simply false. And the problem for Trump is the market. You can bullshit people all day long. You can't bullshit the market because people are making investments with people's money and their fiduciary is to just data.
Yeah. Well, look, what many people are saying, sound like the president, is if we need to have ships built here, let's protect ships. Let's not put massive tariffs on everybody, on every industry. There's no doubt that if you're Dan or me, and to a large extent you, Sean, but I think less because you don't live in New York, you're surrounded by people who think this is the stupidest thing ever. You're surrounded by people who are demanding something changed by Wednesday, either for Republicans in Congress to act or for the president to make major deals that lead to a cascade of additional deals. And the assumption that many of them are making is as bad as we've had for 2 days in the market and as bad as we're expected to have starting in 12 minutes, that it will be worse if people start to say, wait a minute, he's not backing down, that this is going to be the policy for a while. And that would be, a cataclysmic to a greater degree. Jamie Dimon writes an annual letter about the economy. 103, please. Happened to have come out today. I think he probably spent part of his weekend revising it because he's writing about the tariffs. Letter from CEO and chairman to the shareholders. He says the recent tariffs likely to increase inflation and are causing many to consider a greater probability of a recession. And even with the recent decline in market values, prices remain relatively high. These significant and somewhat unprecedented forces cause us to remain very cautious. Now, here is a guy named Howard Marks, who I know, very smart guy, Oak Tree Capital, genius investor, very great track record. And here he is speaking for all the people Dan and I know, the bankers, the investors, the people who have themselves gotten rich because of the international global system and who believe that that's a better system than what Donald Trump is trying to change to. 105, please, Howard Marks.
The good news is that the Italians make the pasta and the Swiss make the watches. But if we stop world trade and the Swiss have to make their own pasta and the Italians have to make their own watches, the world will probably be, well, maybe arguably people in both countries will be a little worse off. That's what we're talking about here. And we should not underestimate the benefits that we've gotten from globalization. The last 80 years since World War II have been the best economic period in the history of mankind. And one of the major reasons was the growth of trade. And I think that we have truly had a rising tide that lifted all boats, and trade was a big part of that. And everybody in the audience should understand the role of trade. Every country, for example, does some things better and worse. And worldwide welfare is maximized when every country does the things it does best and cheapest, and then sells them to the countries that need them, which do other things and sell them to other people. That's how trade works.
So it's not just Howard Marks, of course. It's lots of other people. It's Ben Shapiro, it's Bill Ackman, it's Stan Druckenmiller, it's Dan Loeb, all expressing over the weekend various degrees of upset about what's happening. And I think in some cases are tempering how upset they are, and they're not truly reflecting how upset they are because they don't want to pick a fight with the White House right away. So, Dan, if the president listens to all these geniuses, establishment elite geniuses who've gotten rich off of international trade, and says, you know what? I can't keep going. I got to do something. Besides striking one-off deals like with Israel or with Vietnam, what could he do to not lose face and to not give up on his policy, but to try to ameliorate the crisis?
Well, probably the one that's been spelled out the most, and I actually thought Kevin Hassett is kind of maybe potentially leaning there, is the idea of a pause because, quote, so many countries are reaching out for a deal. I'm a little skeptical that that fact is true, but it would give him breathing room to be more surgical in how he's doing this than to kind of have the sledgehammer approach that they have right now. I think the markets would still be upset because they'd say, are we really going to go back to this in 60 days or 30 days? But I think, the most obvious would be a pause because, quote, there's momentum to deals. So he'll save some face. And then they'll try to figure out a way to kind of calm everybody and be a little more surgical. Look, it's the arsonist fireman.
The problem is, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. The problem is, I think he knows that if he does that, to your point about what the street's reading, and they go, see, this wasn't really serious, and we're not going to take it. I mean, and I also think it undermines the deficit argument. And that's the other problem. Again, they've gotten back to which are you trying to solve? Like, I agree. I think Hassett to me is the most calming, reassuring voice out there. And I would have Kevin Hassett just sitting on Pebble Beach, the White House driveway there, doing interview after interview all day long. And because he is the reassuring voice that is needed right now.
Well, I think the one challenge is he's reassuring in tone. In substance, respectfully, he's not. And look, he has to play the hand he's been dealt, but they are not making it better for people whose job it is to interpret data to make financial decisions. And it's not just Wall Street. CFOs of companies and other things are looking at this saying, do we need to pause? Do we need to draw up plans for layoffs? Because we may be entering a sustained period of great uncertainty, if not a recession. And that's real lives of real people.
I want to talk about Musk and I want to talk about congressional Republicans, but David Bonson's about to start trading in 6 minutes when the market opens. So David, just would love a couple minutes of your overview of where you think today is headed and what people in your business are saying about the administration policy as the week begins.
Well, the futures has certainly been all over the map. And, you were down 1,600 at one point. It's down 900 right now. I expect you're going to trade around the down 1,000 line. It was really unfortunate to see President Trump tweet this morning that what a great thing it is that oil prices and interest rates are down. Obviously, oil prices and interest rates go down every single recession. And the worse the recession, the more they go down. The three things I want to say very, very quickly. This is not an issue Bill Ackman and 401k holders and hedge fund owners. I have over 100 business owners that voted for Trump that I have now documented, and I'm getting ready to put a piece together of data that worked on all weekend of people who they say their business is being destroyed. Small businesses, firing people, getting ready to fire people, declining capital expenditures. This will become a Main Street, not Wall Street story in about 5 minutes if this doesn't stop. We do not manufacture bananas and coffee in the United States of America because we can't. The way it was done, Ackman's tweet may not be the best messenger, but he's exactly right. The way it was done is just so insane. I lack the words. I agree. I'd rather hear Hassett talk than Navarro. I'd rather hear my 4-year-old talk than Pete Navarro, and I don't even have a 4-year-old anymore. But the fact of the matter is that I agree with what Dan said. The substance from Hassett is very contradictory to the substance from Navarro. And I think that Sean's point is a good one. If you show a little bit of interest in negotiation, maybe that tears down the whole premise of what President Trump's trying to get to. But there is just no doubt that President Trump's going to capitulate here and claim victory. Take a victory lap that he got some issue, like countries that don't even tariff us now agreeing to stop tariffs. That's where this thing has to be headed. But the main narrative that I cannot stand is people saying this is only Wall Street people are upset. It is absolutely decimating American business in the heartland. And with that anti-Wall Street comment, I'm going to go back to trading now.
Okay. Thank you, David. All right. Thank you for that. Sean, what's going on with Musk? He said he wants free trade between Europe and the US, zero tariffs. He's attacked Peter Navarro, and he's extolling Adam Smith. He's a senior member of the government, seemingly openly critical of the central policy of the government in which he serves. What's going on there?
I'm fascinated by it. I mean, because you're right. I mean, he basically went after Navarro. I mean, without saying Peter's name, said like guy from California that went to Harvard with gray hair that works in the old executive office building. Like that could be anybody. Um, and then this morning, the sort of the meme that he's so I think part of it is that Elon's got businesses. He doesn't agree with this, and he's looking out for himself. I mean, this is where he put sort of the Elon hat back on, not the SGE, the government employee hat on. But I find it interesting because it's one thing to be on the one, the which person you want to lead the Treasury fight back in the transition days. It's another to openly criticize the president's policies. And all Peter is doing, frankly, I'm sure he's behind it, but like is doing what a good staffer should do, which is support the policy. So I think this is one where sometimes you get a little too far out over your skis. And this might be one of those things where it's one thing to have your own issue. It's another thing when you're whacking the president and his people and his policy. So I think like every once in a while, Elon goes just a little too far, and it's not been a problem. This might start to get there. Today, the first two, like the Navarro clip and the meme one, it wasn't good. But if he goes one step further, I think that's when you could see a hand get slapped.
Dan.
For all those who said Elon Musk has no conflict of interest and he is a great patriot serving America, I'll tell you why he's freaking out. He's exposed all over the world. China is a huge supplier for Tesla. He wants to sell Starlink in Europe. He wants, because the Europeans are green, to sell more Teslas in Europe. The guy is a classic American entrepreneur who sells all over the world. What stock was down? I don't know if it still is because I'm not looking at the market. The stock that was down the most in futures trading this morning was Tesla. A stock that they were down 17, or orders were down 17% in their earnings report the other week. They have huge exposure. He has huge exposure. What happens when your stock starts going down? You got to make some pretty painful decisions. So look, he's speaking for tens of millions.
The funny thing is, I will say this, and this is one of these things that Elon made one of his comments about. He hasn't built something, SH, whatever. Yeah. I think there is an aspect of that there are people who and that's where Elon, I think, is going to have a little bit of sway with the president. I don't think his tactics are going to go over well, but I think to say, yeah, here's who you're relying on: a bunch of people who've taught it, written books, or someone who's actually been in the real world and does a worldwide,
Yep.
like sales deal. I don't. I've operated all these companies, Starlink, X, Tesla, are worldwide companies. Like, I will tell you the reality, and this isn't, theory.
But this is the problem that I find so politically fascinating. His base is MAGA, and the working class has been screwed by free trade from a manufacturing, like, employment standpoint. But let's be candid. He spends his weekends at Mar-a-Lago.
Kill the audio. Just put the picture up. Go ahead, Dan.
He spends his weekends at Mar-a-Lago. He is surrounded by people who are billionaires and rich. He loves, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk kissing his ring and working for him, and guys from Goldman. And so you have, on the one hand, Sean, you said it earlier, he's got to show the base that he's going to, he's all in now. And then he has the reality of all these business people saying, you're insane. So how do you hold it together? This has always been the trick.
We'll watch the market open. We'll get to your questions after one more topic, unless something else comes up. Again, if you want to be in on the conversation, you're here on the two-way platform, please raise your yellow hand. Dan, what's the break point for congressional Republicans? There's no way they're going to pass a bill through both chambers and override a veto. So I don't think there's anything they can do to actually restrain the president with legislation. But what's the break point for them to go to Speaker Johnson or to Thune and to say, we got to do more? The House Republicans have demanded a more comprehensive briefing than they've gotten. But what would have to happen for them to actually step up and demand change?
Yeah, so I don't think they would do. I agree with you, Mark. I don't think they'd do legislation right now. But I do not think that is out of the realm of possibility in the future. Real lives of real people. When you get calls from your constituents saying, Mark, I am going to have to lay off 20% of my workforce, or people say inflation, is going up, the cost of goods and services in your town. Members of Congress care about one thing, and that's getting reelected. And when they feel like it is in their interest to speak up on behalf of their constituents, that is when you will begin to get people who will say, I will potentially separate from the president. And I will just say, as someone who, Trump said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. Listening to the tone of MAGA online, and I'm being serious here, historically, when Trump does this, it is like, I fully believe in Trump, like, yeah. What you hear a lot of is, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and trust that he can figure this out. The tone is softening. Like, I actually think of all the things where he could potentially have some cleavage from his base, it's destroying the economy.
Dan, it's a brilliant point. You're absolutely right in characterization, Sean.
I think the funny thing is, it's already happening. When Ted Cruz came out and said, his concerns about it, that's not Don Bacon from Nebraska, who's not like considered, a strong stalwart of the president. I think that it's going to keep happening. I don't think the president cares. That's the thing. He believes this is the right move to make. And I don't get any sense from his comments last night on the plane, that he has any sense of backing down.
But I think that's Trump's MO, right? He'll never start being queasy in public. He'll be guns a-blazing. But
there's always like a tell where he'll say something like, this is the right policy, but we'll see. And there's no we'll see. There's, he always has an out, and he hasn't given himself that.
I mean, look, I was looking at it today. States where you have senators coming up: Texas, Florida, South Carolina, Kansas, Maine, huge trade states, huge. Now, some point, it's in your interest to separate.
Yeah.
By the way, I know this went unnoticed. I mean, not unnoticed, but it didn't, obviously for obvious reasons not. But kicking the TikTok can down the road for 75 days, I think was telling, because China's reaction was, hey, you're not going to levy tariffs on us and then think that you're going to deal on TikTok, do you think? I mean, like, so that complicated that deal as well. And I will tell you, as someone who wants to ban TikTok, never see it again, and believes it is a massive threat to our national security, I get why the president did that. You can't ban TikTok on the same weekend that global markets are going to go into a tailspin.
Yeah. All right. Ryan, come on in. I'll just say if the market stays where it is, I believe this will be the worst 3 days since the 2008 financial crisis. Ryan,
Well, and what
welcome in.
people are watching is if, Black Monday in the 80s was 30%, we've had 10. If we have another and you get to, let's say, 15 or 20, you're now, it might not happen in a day, but it might happen in a week.
Yeah. Ryan, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, please.
Hi, so I'm in Northwest Iowa, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what you guys were discussing with the tariffs. I don't know if you've already talked about this on maybe one of your nightly shows about the Besant interview with Tucker Carlson. Have you guys talked about that much?
A little bit.
I thought that was really quite helpful. I know I've talked to a lot of friends who are really nervous about what's happening, and he's kind of, in my mind, the one that brings me somewhat comfort about what's happening. He just seems like he has a real solid head on his shoulders, and he kind of knows what he's talking about. But I wanted to, before I get to my question, I wanted to share one example of the effects of these things. So one of my interests is in board games, and a lot of board games are produced or production is done in China. And obviously the board game hobby is kind of panicking because they assume the prices are going to go through the roof because everything is produced there. But it's so bad that most board game designers just assume there's no possibility of making it cheaper in the US because of how cheap it is to do in China. And to me, that seems just really ridiculous that something that's just made of plastic and cardboard, you can't produce in the US cheaper because of how cheap it is to do in China. So that's like just an example. But my main question is about the last week, there's just been this complaint about messaging. And I wonder if Trump intentionally doesn't want to provide one message about what he's trying to do because it gives up the game, right? So if he just says, I'm doing this because I want to bring more manufacturing alone, or I'm looking to just decrease the deficit, or I'm looking for this or that, he kind of gives up the game, that the chaos of it is actually helping him rather than hurting his ultimate goal, although it may seem chaotic right now and doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Ryan, I vote yes on that. I'll let Sean and then Dan weigh in. I vote yes. There's just too much consistent inconsistency, right? There's too much of checking every box on all the possible bills.
Yeah.
Sean has said that's not necessarily a good thing, but I think they still think it's a good thing. It keeps more options open, plays to more audiences. Sean.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Ryan. I will say I don't know that it's intentional as much as he's getting sold, right? In other words, if you think about it, I've said this before, but for 40 years he's been consistent on tariffs and why it's not fair to American workers and companies. And I believe that's the overriding issue. I think this deficit idea got thrown at him.
Oh, hey, Sean, Trump,
Yep.
that's right, that Japan is sending. So Trump's tweeting that Japan is sending people here to negotiate. So they're trying to create a smoke signal to like end this with just bluster.
Well, and by the
That's panic.
Yeah, let me I'll dovetail on that, but I think the answer, Ryan, is I don't think it was intentional that happened, right? I don't think that it was, hey, let's throw out 8 possibilities because we can always be right and we can. I think he got sold the deficit thing down the stretch, and that was attractive, so he added it into his repertoire. But if you notice, when you listen to the surrogates go out there, Bassett, Hassett, Navarro talk about market access much more and fairness, and then Lutnick is on the deficit side. So I think it's almost like you can see the camps of who's saying what. Dan, to your point on that Japan thing, I think this is where what was interesting to me was I had said on Friday, I think they'll put points on the board where it's here are these countries that are taking their tariff barriers down. We're giving them relief, right? Instead, it's become look who's talking.
Yep.
And that's I think that Ryan, that kind of almost plays to your point where it's less about points on the board and activity. Look at all these people who want to meet with me, who want to call me. And Whereas I would want to know, okay, that's great. That's like saying, how many sales calls did you make today versus how many sales did you close, right? And anyone who's in the game knows Dan's smiling because he knows that, a lot of times an employee would be like, I made 100 calls today. No boss cares about that. If you make 4 calls and you close them all, that's better than 100 calls and closing none.
I mean,
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's right. Ryan, thank you. Great question. We have a certified expert with us. I want to bring in quickly, Mark Bednar. Mark, you worked for Speaker McCarthy. Who else did you work for in politics, Mark?
Sean Duffy, now Transportation Secretary. David Perdue, soon to be ambassador to China.
All right. And other folks.
Everyone in between.
Yeah. So, Mark, you've got great insight into what calms the horses or not on Capitol Hill. So talk about what you think the mood is up there amongst Republicans in both chambers and what they need to be calmer than they are currently.
So the House and Senate conferences, they just need to know which direction is north. These are conferences that are, as we've seen, and are criticized as such or get rewarded as such, they are loyal to the president. So they just need to know where to go. And kind of 2 things that come to mind in 2017, 2 big pivot points from a policy standpoint. One was the failure of Obamacare repeal. And that's because even on the onset upon bill introduction, a member of the Committee of Jurisdiction went on TV and was asked 2 simple questions. How much does this cost? And will illegal immigrants be able to participate? And he didn't know the answer to either question. And to me, that was indicative of the fact that no one really was singing from the same song sheet, and they were incapable of, generating their own momentum. And then we saw what ended up happening. Conversely, with tax reform, everyone knew kind of the game plan. They knew where this was headed. And when they say things like, I trust things to get better because of these 3 things I can succinctly point to, you can tell that to the media, to your own constituents when you're doing town halls. So if they are just given the ammunition to point where to go, they will do it. But as we've seen, that's still unclear when that's going to come or, who's going to be that messenger that can actually land this for them.
Yeah. Sean or Dan, question or comment on what Mark said or question for Mark?
I would just say, Mark, don't you think you're going to see some of these guys have to break publicly? In other words, I agree with you. Most of them are like, tell us what we need to know, give us some direction. Well, there. But I think a few, more and more are going to start saying, I got to say to my constituents that I'm expressing concerns publicly.
It's a race against the clock at this point. You need to put the win and the true north in front of these members as soon as possible. They get in tonight. They're going to start facing questions from reporters later tonight. So now's the chance to say, hey, members, let's stick this out because of all these different wins that we're going to get. And if that's not, that doesn't come soon, yeah, that's going to be a problem. Then you're going to have members who are going to be twisting in the wind, unable to fend off these criticisms against the policy.
Dan.
Mark, if you were advising Democrats, what would you tell them?
They should talk about defund the police and open borders. I mean, this is with trade. Obviously, there's a bunch of different parochial industries, and highlighting whether you're supportive of these policies or against these policies, highlighting those individual voices in individual districts or states, that's going to be a big key to all this. And I would think both parties would be smart to kind of use the voice of impacted or beneficiaries of these policies throughout the country.
Yeah, Mark, thank you. Love having you on. Please come back regularly. Great to see you here. Let's dip into the CNBC audio. I just want to get a sense of the tone they're on.
Thursday, where he said you might see car dealers tell you, here's the tariff surcharge, and we're going to put that on the sticker, so you'll know.
Right. It could. I mean, I'm looking to see whether does Amazon go out of stock on some key things because they were made in China and they cancel the purchase order. I think you have to debate whether they'll do that. I think that they will. I think that if you want to see how things go, you want to look at the rates, at shipping rates. That's a good indicator.
All about adding manufacturing jobs. Meanwhile, in the near term, we're going to have volumes go down and jobs go down, conceivably, as a result as well.
But I would tell you that unemployment's so low, it's just that the jobs, can we get the people in certain jobs to be able to shift to other jobs?
All right, mute that. I
We're
will
gonna
say
run out of
I watched
workers
a lot of
unless we.
Squawk Box this morning, and two out of the three anchors are very, very down on the Trump policy. One of the three anchors was a little playing some verbal sleight of hand to not be all in against it. But the financial community and the financial press, and they talk to more people than I do, but they're hearing the same thing I'm hearing from, again, bankers, investors, builders, titans of industry are all saying, and international folks are all saying this policy is horrible and must change. James, welcome in. Thanks for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
Hey, Mark. Thanks, guys. I'm in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, originally from the Midwest, and been in Southeast Asia for the past 7 or 8 years. The feedback that I get is, of course, I talk to a lot of people in Asia, and of course, it's the lack of clarity that's going on and what's happening with the trade. They want to know what's the game plan, and I think I've seen Asians are a lot more tolerant than Europeans are as far as the president and how he handles and deals and negotiates. But my first question is, Dan, my grandfather was a lifelong FDR Democrat, and we always debated. I was an 80s kid Republican. And having worked for both political parties, Dan, can the Democrats use labor, get back on the labor train? Because the one thing I feel is missing on the US dialogue on both political parties is labor. We don't talk about American workers anymore. We talk about American investors. We talk about American tech companies, CEOs. But isn't there an opportunity for the Democrats to talk a little bit more about labor and recapturing that issue that I think right now is lost between both political parties?
Yes. I'm not sure it's lost between both parties because, frankly, I think Trump speaks for them fairly clearly, and this is what this is about. I think the question is, can Democrats make inroads again? There was actually a little bit of a back and forth on social media this weekend because a Democrat from Pennsylvania basically said he supports the tariffs, but not the way they're being done by Trump. And then some on the left attacked him to say, hey, like tariffs are bad. And that goes to the kind of services urban class on the coast versus the industrial heartland, working class folks. And so I think it is a challenge for Democrats. I think how Democrats actually play this is going to be super fascinating because you don't want to root for failure, but it's appropriate to say where you think this is failing, and to try to be reassuring and calm. But you are right. The Democrats need to focus on how to try to win back the working class, and that's why I've been pretty consistent saying I got to be careful here a little bit.
I think the part of the problem, James, is it's not just they like the Democratic Party has maintained a strong hold on union leadership, but not just the rank and file is the problem, which is the actual voters. I think the problem is for the party is that it's not just the labor issues per se. So like issues that pertain to the Teamsters or UAW workers, but it's also the cultural issues, like guns, transgender stuff, where you've got a lot of folks that don't share the democratic values of the woke policies of the Democratic Party. And so they've got two problems. The one is the working men and women problem. And then second is the cultural problems that are aligned with a lot of the union workers.
Yeah.
One
James,
last quick one.
yes, sir. Go ahead.
If you guys, what do you see is the Hill as far as Congress talking about? Again, we have all these big. When I think of finance, the thing in the U.S. I see, we have finance, we have big government jobs, and we have lots of people involved in tech. But boy, when you're in Asia, what do you hear a lot from China? Oh, with their manufacturing, they get new innovation from their manufacturing. Oh, they get new, like we have this old dialogue in the US of manufacturing means a factory in Toledo. When I hear manufacturing in China, it's like, oh, they went ahead and took this opportunity to develop a new battery because of the factory that's in China. Is there any dialogue on the Hill or from interest groups about how we change the idea of what manufacturing means today?
100%. And as Dan said before, it's already happening. There's already advanced manufacturing being done here, and there's a strong belief that when you do that, you do see innovation because the R&D happens sometimes not in a lab but on the floor. And so, yeah, absolutely. In all sorts of fields and technology driven things, it's discussed all the time. Again, the question is the president's policy the best way to bring that about, or is it going to be counterproductive?
Well, and I think the question
but
is, how do you continue that and address the problems of the working class? I think that's the rub. It's not, Trump is trying to present it as an either or. I think the solution is both, and that's where he's getting in trouble.
James, thank you. Really grateful to have you be
Thanks.
part of this. Thanks so much. I'll just make one point because, as you know, I never read the chat, but sometimes I glance at it. All of us are pro Main Street and pro Wall Street. All of us are more pro Main Street than Wall Street. People on Wall Street are not idiots. They are elites. And when I call them elites, don't take it as a slur. They're elites. They're on Wall Street. They're rich. They're richer than almost everyone. They see a lot of data. They have strong views. This platform is not about choosing between Wall Street and Main Street or using elite as a slur. It's about trying to understand what's going on and having a conversation where all voices can be heard. So you can say I don't care about Main Street. Trust me, I do. As I said, I prefer Main Street to Wall Street, but I like Wall Street too. That's simple. All right, Adam, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are after you unmute and what's on your mind. And thank you for being part of Two Way.
All right, sorry, my unmute wasn't working. Thanks for having me, Adam. I'm in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, actually. So I'm up in the north central region of Pennsylvania. We're a pretty rural community, actually. So I just kind of joined here just to offer a little bit of perspective. I don't really have a question here. And I forget the gentleman's name, the investor that popped in.
David Bahnsen.
Bahnsen, yes. He's awesome. I love listening to him when I can. He is absolutely right about the Main Street impact, and all of you are. I mean, just looking at my community, I'm on my local city council. I'm the president of it. You know, I mean, we are we're nervous. I'm nervous about the impacts that are potentially facing us.
What are the impacts going to be potentially?
I've got people in my family and in the community that are already thinking like they're close to retirement. They're like, I might have to wait another year or two. The city that I'm in specifically, poverty rate's about 25% at our school district. And those families predominantly are shopping at places like Dollar General, places where things are so heavily imported. And I worry about them being able to afford things if these tariffs come into play here. From a city perspective, you know, financially, we're kind of on the brink of a little bit of a financial stress of our own. And if you start seeing some of these longer term economic consequences that they're talking about, once you start losing jobs, more inflation coming back, that's going to have a direct impact to our coffers, to where we're really going to struggle to provide just basic services like, you know, public safety, public works, et cetera. So there's a real tangible impact. And I mean, if I could just make a plea to anybody of influence watching, it's at a minimum, pick a direction, provide some clarity to Main Street so we can plan to some degree, in some way, shape, or form. Individually, just pull it back. I just don't see how this is a way to really bring back the manufacturing that they're talking about. I mean, we've got about a 17% manufacturing mix right here in town, and it's advanced manufacturing. We're manufacturing more pharmaceutical products. We're manufacturing engines for aerospace. We're doing electronics manufacturing for defense and other industries. So we have a pretty solid manufacturing base here in Williamsport that is probably contrary to what a lot of, I think, people are thinking about in terms of what manufacturing may look like, et cetera. So just some trying to add a little bit of perspective to the conversation. Yeah. You guys are right.
Adam, super interesting. I want to turn you over to Sean and Dan, but I want to ask a question. With all that manufacturing in your town, why do you have a 25% poverty rate?
It's a great question. I mean, we've got good manufacturing in town, but I mean, our biggest services, like a lot of rural communities, it's healthcare, it's education. You know, so It's a great question. I don't fully know the answer to it, and frankly, I
Okay.
should.
Yeah,
If
that's all
I'm
right.
being
That's all
honest with
right.
you,
It's complicated. It's complicated. Sean.
yeah, it is.
So, um, how many of your folks do you think? I always find that there's sort of a theoretical, I want Trump to fight for our jobs. And then, when things start to go, it's like, but not this way. Like, is it that you
Yeah.
want the direction or you are concerned about the overall policy?
So let me. I'm going to answer it in two different ways. All right. Lycoming County is a deep Trump county. He carried it by over 70%. The broader county is really going to be in the category of you're fighting for us. You do what you want to do. City of Williamsport, it went Trump by about maybe 5 points. Okay. So you see a lot more discrepancy in kind of the feedback. For me individually and kind of my feedback, I would really push picking a path, right? Because I just don't see how this broad approach of tariffs is productive in any way, whether it's bringing back manufacturing, whether it's the trade deficit. You look at any kind of work and research out there on tariffs, and I mean it's pretty clear that they're inflationary. They drive up prices. Yeah, they may in the long term bring industry back, but they really stifle innovation. They're not going to enable competitiveness, and so whenever you pull those tariffs back down the road, and under another administration, what have you, eventually those jobs are going to erode anyway. So that's kind of the feedback. To answer your question, Sean, I hope that does.
Dan.
I mean, just it's heartbreaking to hear it.
Yeah, it's hard.
The precipice that we may be on, your tax revenue would no doubt start to shrink up, and that's going to accelerate even more pressure on very hard decisions. I don't have a question per se. It's a great perspective. Great comments.
Adam, how many times of the 3 general elections did you vote for Trump?
One. I voted third party 2016. I voted for Trump in 2020. And I wrote somebody in 2024.
Okay. And is this a big topic of conversation amongst your fellow council members?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we've got a handful of other bigger things kind of going on with like day-to-day issues that we're in the midst of working through, but it always comes up.
Yeah.
It's come up and more so, I would also say this, for probably about the past month, it's a fairly common conversation with the Doge component of this, because we've got a good amount of public sector workforce here in town. And I mean, I'm trying to remember, there was an EPA office that shut down, and then there's been some other cuts with the DOJ. Our federal courthouse for the region is in Williamsport, and so we're seeing some employment impacts from Doge from that perspective as well. So this tariff piece is really
Adam,
compounding a lot of that.
Adam, real quick, have any of your federal officials, either Senator McCormick, Senator Fetterman, or the congressional delegation, reached out to you at all to sort of explain what they're doing, or hey, just let us know if you have questions?
They haven't reached out to me individually. However, our mayor is in pretty constant contact with them, and so we've started to get a little bit of kind of guidance on that. We have offered perspective kind of through that, and it's just easier, kind of respecting the mayor approach to that, a consistent conduit. So we're working through that, but not to me specifically.
Yeah. Adam, real quick, if the president said to you, Adam, I'm not taking the tariffs off, but give me some advice about how to better let the country understand them, what would you tell him?
Clear up the messaging. It's awful. It's it's the worst I've ever seen. Hassert, I agree with all of you. Hassert is the guy. Get Lutnick off, get Besson off, get all of them off. The messaging would go a long way to at least easing some concerns. It doesn't change the policy. It's still bad policy from my perspective, and it still makes me nervous. But clean up the messaging.
Yeah.
Tomorrow,
Adam,
like
thank
today.
you. Really, really generous of you to come on and share all that. Thank you so much for being part of Two-Way.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so let's again, the president's press conference at 2:30 this afternoon will be a big moment, and again, could well start late. Sean, what do you have tonight on your program?
We're going to break this all down. I mean, we're just going through all the tariffs, the Sunday shows, where we are, and obviously preview the BB meeting tonight.
All right. Megan McCain's program, Megan McCain's happy hour tonight at 5 p.m. Eastern Time with Lydia Moynihan and Jessica Tarlov, two excellent, smart people. So don't miss that. Again, that's 5 p.m. Eastern Time today. And then immediately after that, I'll be back with Two-Way tonight. My guests will include Hogan Gidley, former Trump administration official and also an advisor to Speaker Johnson, as well as Sarah Bianchi, who is super expert on tariffs and who has been writing a lot about them for her firm. So join me at 6 o'clock for Hogan Gidley, Sarah Bianchi, and everybody here. Let's quickly check where the markets are before we go. Well, CNBC's in break, but you can see the NASDAQ is down and everything's down. So we'll watch that all day. Full coverage at 6 tonight of the press conference and everything else that's going on. Looking forward to seeing you then. And of course, the three of us will be back in 23 hours for another edition of the morning meeting. Thank you for watching. Thanks everybody who raised their hand to participate. We'll see everybody in 23 hours. Have a great day.